Hello, my name's Pete. I'm the Aussie Bush Cop. In 2012 I retired from the New South Wales Police and moved to beautiful King Island, where I became a homesteader. And I'd like to share with you some of my stories of crime and criminals from the New South Wales bush. G'day everybody, great to have you with me again. Sitting over here in my cabin, and the location where we do these podcasts is a cabin. Well, I call it a cabin. It's really a hut. And one time, some years ago, I went horse riding in the high country of New South Wales, and I saw buildings like this peppered throughout the high country, and I decided that when I come home to my homestead, I was going to build one, and so I did. And it's a great spot. Anyway, the story I have for you today is about a domestic-related job. And sadly, a lot of the domestics we went to were repeat offenders and repeat victims, of course. This one is just a tad different in that, let's call them husband and wife. They seem to alternate as to who was going to be the victim this time and who was going to be the offender. And this one's a little bit different in that this time was the male who was the victim of the female. And but it's really sad that we got to know these people quite well. Routinely arresting them, putting before the court and taking out protection orders against them, and the orders being breached, and it just goes on and around, and constantly in a descending cycle of violence, and which sometimes, of course, ends up in murder. This particular one, they were repeat offenders, victims, and we were under instructions to vigorously prosecute domestic violence offenders. And this is a time when I'd actually decided to do that. Well, not that I didn't do it before, but I'll explain as I go along. So I went to their home. It was a residential home in a small town. And he was the victim this time. And we were taking details, as in their names and statements, and gathering evidence. And so I got a statement from him at the scene in my notebook, and he'd been struck 3 different times. There was only a brief period of time between being assaulted, but it was a moving assault. Like, they went from one room to another room and then to another room. So these 3 assaults actually happened in maybe at least 2 different rooms. And I made the decision to charge the female with 3 different assaults. Now, what you think, well, so what? But ordinarily, what happened is that we would just lay one charge of, let's say, domestic common assault, but in one of the documents that goes to the court, meaning the facts sheet, which basically tells the narrative story, that those 3 assaults would be listed. And the magistrate could read it and see, well, he's actually been assaulted 3 times, but there's only one charge of common assault. But on this occasion, I decided to lay 3 charges. And then also she got some of his DVDs, back in the days when we had DVDs, and she'd thrown them down the front footpath, and they clattered along the footpath, on the concrete footpath. And I asked him, did you have to clean them before you used them again? And he said yes. So that constitutes the offence of malicious damage. And so I charged her with a number of malicious damage offences. Anyway, while we're at the house gathering this evidence, and my partner who was with me tacitly drew my attention to a sign that was on one of the windows of the home, and the sign that was on the window was facing the street and was reasonably close to a footpath and passing people on foot could very easily stop and read this sign. And my partner then took a photograph of it, because we could, even though we were reading it, let's say in reverse, was still reasonably easy to read because it had been printed off a computer. So it wasn't like it was handwritten and perhaps hard to read. It was in an easy to read cursive print, and we could read it. And I must admit, when I read it, I had a bit of a chuckle. And one of the documents that goes to the magistrate or any judicial officer has a section on it called the antecedents, which I think is Latin, which means things that go before. Anyway, I took the photograph of this sign, and which said, and you have to pardon my language, but I can't tell you what the sign said without using the language. But it said, this won't be perfect, but very, very close to this. The good Lord made a perfect world, a beautiful world, full of butterflies and dolphins and pretty birds and lovely trees, and then fucked it up by putting Senior Constable Peter Gillett in it. And I took a bit of a wry chuckle out of that. And when I prepared the charge papers, I put that in the document that the magistrate would read, as far as the antecedents about what you might say about the thoughts that person had about me, and perhaps about police in general. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that all those charges that I laid against that woman, she was on what's known as a suspended sentence. And when I prepared the charges, what happens is that you then send those charges on to another police officer, where they look at it and they accept the charge. And that's just really a vetting process to make sure that I've dotted the I's, crossed the T's, that I've got all the proofs of the offence embodied in the fact sheet. And either he or she then accepts the charge. And it's pretty normal for that officer maybe to make no comment about it at all, but this particular officer, who was a sergeant, I recall, he said, "Pete, what's going on here, mate?" And meaning, why have you put 3 charges instead of 1? And why all these different offences for the malicious damage to the DVDs? And I just reminded him of the department's view and assertion that we are to vigorously prosecute domestic violence offenders, which I never ever backed off. I loved arresting and prosecuting domestic violence offenders. And when it goes to court, the prosecutor has a fair bit of levity, and he can, you might say in some early negotiations when it goes to court, with the defence counsel, can say, listen, we will drop the other 2 charges if your client will accept, will enter a plea of guilty on the others, which I reasonably expected to happen. But to my great surprise, that lady went to court and pled guilty to all of them. And I don't recall what happened to her with regard to sentence, because, like I said, she was on a suspended jail term, suspended jail sentence, and ran the great risk of going to prison for committing any other offences. But anyway, I've got lots of other stories that I'll bring to you about domestic violence matters, just so that you can be aware of actually what happens, and I think that'll be helpful for everyone to know. So thanks for watching, and I hope life's going well for you.